Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back to the Mysticism Decoded podcast. I am your host, Aleph Lev, and in this episode, we're going to continue on with the audiobook and analysis of the gateway process. I think we can actually make it to the end on this one. And in the last pod, we covered the section Belief Systems, which was section 34. If you missed that, that is a particularly cool section because here in the CIA document, it actually connects the gateway process to mysticism of all religions. Kabbalah, Judeo-Christian, Buddhist, Chinese, Hindu. It lays it all out here. And if you haven't seen my prior pods and you do not know, I am someone that subscribes to ancient astronaut theory. And I consider my work to be picking up where authors and researchers like Zecharia Sitchin left off, where they were focused mainly on the Bible. I intend to focus mainly on books of mysticism, specifically, for the most part, Judeo-Christian, which would be Kabbalah and Merkavah. But not limited to that strictly, I will be covering other ancient texts from other religions, other books of mysticism, really anything that makes sense in my scope. But that was a really interesting pod. If you guys want, please feel free to check that out. But now we are up to section 35, left brain limitations. And let's get right into it. 20th century physics would seem to be revisiting insights belonging to mankind as far back as written records can take us. The only difference is that 20th century physics is using a left brain linear quantitative style of reasoning to approach the same knowledge which the mystics of old apparently acquired in a holistic, intuitional, right brain style. So just to give an example of what this sentence really means, for example, in science, they say from nothing came everything, and they call that the Big Bang. But if you are a mystic or a student of Kabbalah, you know that the nothing that they are referring to is not actually nothing, but it is infinite consciousness. So out of infinite consciousness came everything, and we know that that's as a result of that infinite consciousness, which is infinite energy or energy in a state of infinity, confining its energy to create the universe and everything in it. And that is really what the Big Bang is. It is a confinement of energy. And if you did not see my prior pods, I went into this in more detail regarding the genesis of the universe as laid out by the document. Matter comes in through a white hole or a quasar, exits through a black hole. Time is literally energy going around the torus and evolving. I'll be covering this in even greater detail in my next series when I start covering my book, Connect to Source, which compares this CIA declassified document to the first book of Kabbalah, which is the Sefer Yetzirah in Hebrew, or Book of Creation in English, where it basically lays out the same ideas and science as this document, except this document does it in modern scientific English, whereas the Sefer Yetzirah does it in ancient, poetic, enigmatic Hebrew. But if you interpret it properly, you see that it is talking about the same things, the same concepts. All right, let's continue. As a tool in the hands, as a tool in the hands of our left brain culture, Gateway would seem to be a promising method for achieving the intuitive, holistic type of interface with the universal hologram needed to provide the context that thinkers like Einstein have sought in their labors to discover a unified field theory in physics. For persons in our profession whose concerns revolve around strategic issues, tactical questions, and matters of managerial form and system, access to a new world of intuitive perception and self-reflection would seem to offer in the long term the means by which to know in a truly objective way. So the unified field theory, that thing that Einstein was always searching for to bring everything together, we come to understand from this document that this really represents energy in infinity, or essentially God. It would have been interesting had Einstein just called the unified field theory God originally, but there's always this stigma among scientists that are smart but not spiritual, and they, for whatever reason, don't like to label the unified field theory as God. But what's funny is that science and religion, whenever you go down far enough, they always meet in the middle. So unified field theory is God, but God is energy in a state of infinity. Now, energy in a state of infinity is something that they're okay with. That's a title that they're okay with. But God is not a title that they're necessarily okay with. And even in this document, they don't use the word God. They use the word the absolute. So it's just a matter of, are you a left brain analytical type of person? Or are you a right brain, holistic, intuitive, creative type of person? Or best yet, are you the type of person that can bring both together and understand both approaches? That's really what you want to strive for. This is so because the self-imposed limitations to balanced perception and objective logic, which are cultural and personal psychological subjectivity, imposes when we use the strictly left brain thinking style, could be offset by the holistic form of perception associated with altered states of consciousness. To the extent that we come to perceive ourselves fully in the context of that portion of the universal hologram, which is the reflection of ourselves, to that extent we release ourselves from the prison of subjectivity. Okay, great. Now that's going to dovetail very nicely into the next section titled Self-Knowledge, section 36. It was axiomatic to the mystic philosophers of old that the first step in personal maturity could be expressed in the aphorism, "Know thyself." To them, the education of a man undertook as its primary step achievement of an introverted focus so that he learned what was within himself before attempting to approach the outside world. They rightly assumed that he could not effectively evaluate and cope with the world until he fully understood his personal psychological balance. So what this is saying is you really need to be comfortable with yourself and understand who you are before you could deal with the external world and other people. And that's as true today as it was in ancient times. And, just think about socially, you have someone who is completely insecure and lacks confidence, does not know who they really are, lacks an identity. And these are the type of people that struggle in society. Versus the opposite, whenever you have people that are confident, they have an identity, they know who they are, they have things that they know or believe in very deeply, these are the people that do better in society. The insights being provided by 20th century psychology in this context, through the use of various kinds of personality testing, seem to be a revalidation of this ancient intuition, but no personality test or series of tests will ever replace the depth and fullness of the perception of self, which can be achieved when the mind alters its state of consciousness sufficiently to perceive the very hologram of itself, which it has projected into the universe in its proper context as part of the universal hologram in a totally holistic and intuitional way. This would seem to be one of the real promise of the gateway experience from the standpoint of its ability to provide a portal through which, based on months if not years of practice, the individual may pass in his search to find self, personal effectuality, and truth in the larger sense. So via transcendental meditation and via the gateway process, you can find yourself to an extent that you would not have otherwise. You can see the bigger picture of life and the nature of reality and understand the nature of God, of that Kabbalistic term we use Ein Sof for the infinite, meaning no end in Hebrew. And this is what you call a real state of enlightenment. All right, let's move on to the next section, 37. Motivational aspect. It is a step-by-step procedure which involves repetitive practice of the techniques concerned, using each new insight as a means of penetrating farther during the next practice session. But the rate of progress is so much faster with the gateway approach than it is with transcendental meditation or other forms of mental self-discipline, and its horizons seem to be so much wider that the discipline needed to practice it would seem to be within the means of even the impatient, result-oriented, skeptical pragmatist of our society. Unlike yoga and other forms of Eastern mental discipline, Gateway does not require the infinite patience and total personal subservience to and faith in a system of discipline designed to absorb all the individual's energies over most of a lifetime. Rather, it will begin to produce at least minimal results within a relatively short time, such that enough feedback is available to motivate and energize the individual to continue working with it. So what this is saying is, unlike meditation alone, where you might have to practice it for months or years to see results, with Gateway, the specific sounds that are played to you, the frequencies and the protocols, you're going to see at least some results very quickly. So it's basically like a cheat code. And Gateway still really does involve meditation, so I don't think it's right to say that it's completely separate from transcendental meditation. It's really just more of an enhanced meditation that helps you to achieve these higher altered states of consciousness and to go out of body much more easily than you could without Gateway. So it's really like a hack or a cheat code to speed things up. Indeed, the speed with which an individual may expect to progress seems less a function of the number of hours spent practicing than it is a question of the speed with which he or she is able to use the insights gained to release anxieties and stresses within both the mind and the body. These points of energy blockage seem to provide the principal barriers to achieving the enhanced energy states and focus of mind needed for rapid progression. The more compulsive, the more uptight the individual may be at the outset, the more barriers he or she will initially encounter to achieving a deep or immediate experience. But as the insights begin to come and the blockages begin to dissolve, the way ahead becomes increasingly clear, and the value of Gateway moves from the status of a matter of intellectual assessment to one of personal experience. So the long and short of this section is really Gateway is going to help you to get to these higher focus levels and out of body much more quickly than without the Gateway tips. It would take you months or years without them, but with them you could see results in a week, less than a week, at least some results. But put them together, gateway plus practice and discipline, you can become extremely proficient. And as people who are proficient say, that they can go out of body at a moment's notice, essentially instantly. They don't even need to meditate anymore. It's just sort of like a skill that they can call on at will. So something that we all want to get to, right? I certainly do. Last section, 38, conclusion. There is a sound, rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. Intuitional insights of not only personal but of a practical and professional nature would seem to be within bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the gateway experience in an accelerated mode would seem to be required if the time needed to reach advanced states of altered consciousness is to be brought within more manageable limits from the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide exploitation of gateway's potential. The most promising approach suggested in the foregoing study involves the following steps. A. Begin by using the gateway hemisync tapes to achieve enhanced brain focus and to induce hemisphere synchronization. B. Then add strong REM sleep frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. C. Provide hypnotic suggestion designed to enable an individual to induce deep auto-hypnotic state at will. D. Use auto-hypnotic suggestion to attain much enhanced focus of concentration and motivation in rapidly progressing through Focus 12 exercises. E. Then repeat steps A and B following use of the auto-hypnotic suggestion that an out-of-body movement will occur and be remembered. F. Repeat step E to achieve facility in gaining out-of-body state under conscious control. Alter hypnotic suggestion to stress ability to consciously control out-of-body movement and maintain it even after REM sleep state ends. G. Approach Focus 15 and 21 objectives. Escape from time, space, and interact with new dimensions from the out-of-body perspective. H. Use multi-focus approach to solve problem of distortion in terrestrial information gathering trips. This approach involves the use of 3 individuals in the out-of-body state, one viewing the target object here in time-space, one viewing it at focus 15 as it slips into the immediate past, and one viewing it at focus 21 as it slips from the immediate future. Debrief all 3 and compare data gathered from the 3 points of view if care is taken to ensure that the 3 all go out of body together in the same environment. Their conscious energy system should resonate in sympathetic oscillation. They can tune in to the same target on different planes or dimensions with greater effectiveness. Now, this section H also has application when it comes to the creation of the golem that we discussed on prior pods. And I'll cover this again in my next series while we are getting deeper into the creation of the golem. But the point here being is multiple people is greater than a single individual for any objective that regards manifestation or looking at different points of time. So section H is rather important. I. Encourage pursuit of full self-knowledge by all individuals involved in the foregoing experiments to enhance objectivity in out-of-body observation and thinking, and to remove personal energy blockages likely to retard rapid progress. J, be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporal energy forms when the time-space boundaries are exceeded. So we talked about this in the Alice in Wonderland pod, where once you go into the other dimensions outside of the dimensions of length, width, height, and time, the first four, expect to interact with other forms of consciousness that inhabit those dimensions. And be prepared, because not all of them are necessarily benevolent. Some of them may have an agenda that is not to your best interest. Section K, arrange to have a group of people in Focus 12 state unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. So this section K is also interesting because it is saying you can use a group of people to basically build sort of an energy field around sensitive areas, whatever a sensitive area may be, to keep away these energy forms that are undesired and don't have your best interests at heart. And again, whenever I eventually cover the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, we're going to see these come into play, because the Emerald Tablets of Thoth are really about Thoth's astral travels, and he talks about running into energy forms that wish to do him harm, and he actually has to escape back to his body immediately in order to flee from them. Section L, encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. So this is more basically teamwork makes the dream work. If these experiments are carried through, it is to be hoped that we will truly find a gateway and to the realm of practical application for the whole system of techniques which comprise it. And that's all, folks. That's the document. On the next page, we have a bibliography of books that were referenced within the document. But we are finally through. We made it all the way to the end. If you have been watching this series and you made it to this point, I want to give you a special thank you. I hope that you have become more enlightened. You have now learned the actual nature of reality and how our universe works. This is not just scientific theory. We have existing science and programs that operate on these principles, including the government program of remote viewing that has been operated for multiple decades already at this point. And again, this is a repeatable science. Even though it's an esoteric repeatable science, anyone is capable of doing the acts of remote viewing and going out of body. So just because it is not easy to pull off does not mean that it is not repeatable. It certainly is. We have many people that can and have provided us reliable testimony firsthand. So this is not scientific theory. This is really how things work. It is just suppressed science. But now that we've made it through the gateway process, we have laid the foundation, the understanding that we live in God's imagination, and this is a reality of God's imagination crystallized, made dense and physical by means of confining and slowing down that infinite energy. So essentially anything that can be conceived and thought of is real. Nothing is impossible. Now that we are going to get into actual Kabbalistic texts, starting with the first book of Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah, and we go on from there. But whenever I start talking to you guys about things like how the universe was created with wave interference patterns, how humanity was essentially breeded by extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki, that we look just like them. As it says in the Bible, we made them in our image. We, plural, our image. They look like us, or we look like them. Whenever I talk about things like time travel, wormholes, black holes, spacecraft, other species living in inner Earth, everything that you've ever considered to be sci-fi, it is not sci-fi, it is real. Because just like you can imagine anything happening in a computer game or video game, and the smart people that call reality a digital simulation but are not spiritual, so they can't make the connection to, even though it's equivalent to a computer simulation, this is God's mind come to life. And as I showed in the last pod, the dual hidden meaning within the Hebrew word Breshit, standing for Genesis, having to do with the creation of the universe. Whenever you unscramble the Hebrew word Breshit, you come up with the word, or the words, Beit Rosh. Beit Rosh in Hebrew meaning house of the mind. Breshit unscrambled gives you Beit Rosh, house of the mind. So on one side we have Genesis, on the other side we have house of the mind. If you think that this is an accident, that this wasn't programmed into the Hebrew language by the progenitors of the Hebrew language, meaning the Anunnaki, then, I don't know if there's really hope for you. As harsh as that sounds, I just don't know what to tell you if that doesn't move the needle for you. If you think that's coincidence, you're just not likely the type of person to accept the nature of reality as it is. And I'll leave off with one of my favorite lines as well, one of my favorite quotes. And this is the first rule of the samurai. The first rule of the samurai states, accept everything exactly as it is. Thank you again for joining me on this pod. Just like everyone else asked for, this is a new pod I'm looking to get off the ground. If I have earned it from you, please like, share, comment, subscribe. And we are getting to the really fun stuff now, getting into the books of Kabbalah and Merkavah and other ancient texts. And I will be translating them through the lenses of modern technology, cutting-edge scientific theory, and ufology, the way that they are meant to be translated correctly. So although you have people that do this for the Bible, you have people that do this for the Book of Enoch. That's really the only book that they do it for extra biblically within books of mysticism. There are many, many, many more books that you never heard of, that it is imperative to translate them through this lens. The Sefer Yetzirah, the first book of Kabbalah, being one of them, that aligns so perfectly with the gateway process that I had to write a book on it. And the reason that I had to write a book on it is because I thought the book would have existed already whenever I put the two together myself. And I searched for it because I wanted to buy it and read it, and it didn't exist. That's why I wrote it. Had it existed, I never would have wrote it. I would never have this YouTube channel. I just would have consumed it. So no one is doing what I intend to do to the extent that I am intending to do it. All the books that I'm going to be bringing to you are extremely rare and suppressed and mostly unknown, Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Bahir, Sefer Raziel Hamalach, being a book written firsthand by an angel. Yes, you didn't know that angels write books, because these are corporeal beings. These are members of the Anunnaki, not non-corporeal angels in the angelic realm, like you have come to understand angels always meaning. Now, could angels be referring to that within the Bible at some points? Possibly. But for the most part, when you see the word angel in the Bible, we are talking about the army, the military of the Anunnaki. The angels are literally a military force. And if you are familiar with the Bible at all, this should not be that much of a stretch for you to understand that the angels represent a military force. And if you're familiar with the angels in Scripture, they're always described to resemble the face of a man, except they are much larger. And these are characteristics that we know of the Anunnaki. So we'll be getting to all these things in further detail in the future series. I do actually plan to do one summary video. I have an idea in mind to summarize the gateway process and tie it to the larger concept of God-mind architecture, and blend that with the ending of one of my favorite shows, being The Sopranos. And there's a lot of hoopla on whether or not Tony Soprano lives or dies after the screen fades to black. But I'm going to explain to you in this summary video, using God-mind architecture and the nature of reality, why it is that Tony Soprano is both dead and alive. So I hope you guys catch that one. It's going to be a lot of fun. Until then, thank you once more. Aleph Lev, out.